everybody. I think we're about ready to get started here with the program. I would like to begin by welcoming everyone to SC4's 4th annual RAINN Day. RAINN Day is the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network's annual campaign to raise awareness of the issue of sexual assault on college campuses. I would like to thank our sponsors for today's event, including SC4's Social Science Department, SC4's Gay Straight Alliance, Blue Water Safe Horizons, St. Clair County Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Council, St. Clair County Prosecutor's Office, and St. Clair County Sheriff's Department. We've got 4 speakers today, and I'm hoping you all learn a lot. We also have surveys that the college would like you to fill out, so if you can fill those out and then hand them to someone outside before you leave, that'd be great. Our first speaker for today's program is Jennifer Rader, and she will be speaking on the issue of sexual assault and the impact that has on victims. I apologize, the speakers are going to be out of order from your program, but Jennifer, go ahead.
Okay, can everyone hear me? Yes? Okay. All right, so everyone, I'm Jennifer Rader, advocate for domestic and sexual violence. I'm a Wayne State grad student currently right now in the social work program. So I do want to give my contact information from right now in the beginning. So if you want to write that down, you're more than welcome to. If you have questions, you can email me. Speak with me after today if you have other questions, personal that you want to talk about, or just whatever. So I'm here for that. So first I'm going to talk a little bit about some language. Depending on the system that maybe you're working with, or maybe that you guys will be working with, you're going to be using different kind of language. So in the criminal justice system, a lot of times they use victim. And a lot of times we want to remember that, like during my slideshow here, I just want to remember that this is about like being a friend and how you respond. So keep in mind to go with the language that maybe your friend's going with, or your family member, whoever. So kind of go with the lead of that. If they're saying that they're a survivor, go with that. If they're saying they're a victim, go with that. Just know that there's advocates available today to talk to. I'm one of them after, if you'd like to talk with them. Any of our panel you can talk to after as well. There's a lot of information and resources at the front desk. If you didn't see, please take a look at that. There's some really good information there. And keep in mind too that maybe you're not a survivor, but maybe you're going to have clients. Maybe someone in your family is a survivor. So having those resources available is going to be extremely important for you, especially when someone's coming to you in confidence. Just remember that sexual assault affects everyone. Again, I want to reiterate that 1 in 3 for women in their lifetime will be affected by sexual assault, and 1 in 6 for men. Again, I think that those are pretty, maybe a little bit conservative. We're seeing that men even too, it's reaching around 1 in 3 too. But, you know, the data's not there just yet on the research. So what is sexual assault? How do we define that? So it's something that's without consent. So if you're using coercion, physical force, or a threat. Now a threat can be anything. It could be someone standing in this room right now. That could be a threat maybe to you. It could be something they're saying. It could be something they're wearing. A police officer sometimes has that power. So that can maybe be something, like for an example, that you could think of, that maybe you're not going to do something in front of them because they're an authority figure, you know. So to a survivor, there may be someone in their life that's an authority figure because of past experiences. So also too, we want to talk about if they're physically incapacitated by being intoxicated or impaired, if they're asleep or unconscious, those are some things to think about. I don't know why this is out of order. And also too, sexual assault is not just penetration, right? It's about fondling or touching. That's all in the definition of sexual assault, molestation, those kind of things. And just keep in mind that a person of any sexual orientation or gender identity can be sexually assaulted. So it's It doesn't matter who you are, how you identify, you're just as likely to be sexually assaulted in your life too. So there's not anything specific demographic that sexual assault hits on. So consent, another thing about consent that you have to think about too is being pressured by your own intimate partner. We know that 89% of sexual assaults happen by people we know, right? So, you know, that's our family members, that's our boyfriend, that's our husband, our uncles, you know. I mean, they could be women as well too, it's just less likely. So keep that in mind about being pressured by a partner, you know, that's being coercive as well. The other thing to keep in mind too is you want to look at too, within that relationship that you have with someone, if the search model is happening. So if you're having consent with that person, that's mutual. Equality, you feel that you're equal in the relationship in some way. And respect, trust, and safety. A good point that I want to make is this point right here. So consent means the person agrees, not if the person fails to resist. So again, it's about if you're pressuring someone, again, if they're not feeling that that's consensual, that is rape, and that is sexual assault. And it's not assumed, so keep that in mind again. Just because you're with a partner doesn't mean you can, you know, just have sex with them whenever you want, or expect those kind of things. That is sexual assault. I think this picture here, I've looked at a lot of pictures. I think this is pretty impactful. A lot of people think that if you're intoxicated or drunk, that you're, you know, maybe looking for it or whatever, or maybe you agreed about having sex before you got drunk, but that doesn't still mean that it's consent. So, because in that mind frame, you're not consenting. Okay. So, there's a good number of people in here. How about everyone's kind of partnered up. Why don't people talk about maybe their most consensual experience that they've had with their partner? Maybe just with the partner that's next to you. If you don't have one, you can go ahead and partner that up. Just, you know, talk about the details of that. Does anyone share?
I think she was being funny.
Okay.
Silly, right?
So we would all probably agree that it's a little awkward, like someone said, right? Probably a lot. Keep in mind that I used the word consensual, right? So I didn't say talk about maybe if you were sexually assaulted or raped, talk about that. But something that was consensual, something that was willing. So, pretty awkward. So we know that, you know, explaining that's really uncomfortable. So try to imagine yourself and wrap your mind around what that could look like if a survivor is opening up to anyone. Could be a family member, the police, judges, whoever, you know, if they're involved in systems. That's really difficult to do, because obviously it's really hard to even talk about a consensual sexual experience. Again, we may leave out parts too. We know that with a sexual assault, it's a very traumatic thing. So we're not going to remember what A, B, and C was. We might remember a little bit of what's going on, maybe through it. We might forget some things. So keep that in mind, that it's not a step-by-step process. They may forget things and come back to them. Again, I just want to reiterate, so as a survivor, you have to explain this probably numerous times with the system, or just a way to kind of release that or to explain that to someone of what happened to you. So that can be a really difficult process for a lot of people to do, almost everyone. I want to touch on false reporting a little bit. 2% of sexual assaults are falsely reported, okay? A lot of people bring it up and say, oh, well, what if she's lying about it, or, you know, making it up. I want to make a really good point about this, that it is the same as any other crime. So Yes, it does happen, but it happens in everything. People make false reports about a lot of things. And this is right from the FBI too. So, also, whatever role you are, make sure to stick to that. If you're a friend, listen. Don't investigate, don't judge. That's not really your role. So keep that in mind. You know, asking questions and probing may not really be appropriate if you're just there to listen. So kind of just fulfill that role and respect the individual's self-determination. They determine when they're going to tell you and what they're going to tell you. And keep in mind too that the crime is against the rapist, so don't ask re-victimizing, questions like, oh, why did you get drunk? Or why did you go to the bar that night? Because a lot of times the victim's already re-victimizing themselves and asking themselves those questions. So don't try to, ask those questions. Think about what you're saying before you talk with them about those questions that you have. Also remember that no actions from the survivor is going to evoke a rape. A rape is something that's premeditated and pre-planned. So this is a quick breakdown. I'm going to give you guys a second to kind of write this down. I know some people are writing some notes. So, and this slideshow too, if you need it, just email me and I'll email it to you. So this just kind of breaks down a little bit about how out of every 100 rapes, the most that I want to take into account is the bottom here. Oops, I'm so sorry. This right here. 3 rapists will spend even 1 day in jail. So keep that in mind when we're talking about, prosecution and those kind of things, and why that is. Sexual assault cases are extremely difficult to prosecute. And 97% of them walk free, and a lot of them is because they're not reported to police, right? So we have to start making some system changes ourselves of, how do we protect the survivor from retaliation? Because a lot of times that's what it is, it's retaliation. If you tell, I'm going to, kill your family. I mean, there's a lot of threats and coercion that happen with the sexual assault. So those are ongoing even after the sexual assault. It doesn't just stop there, right? It doesn't stop at the incident that occurs. Is everyone done with that? I'm sorry. Yes? Okay. So just a few things from research. We know that rape is about power and control over the individual. It's also not an act of sexual gratification. We know that. And this is an actual quote from, this might be from David Lee Sex Research, actually, I'm not sure. He does a lot of research with rapists. So the mindset is, it's premeditation. I'm going to have sex tonight. If it's consensual, fine, but I'm going to have sex tonight. So that's the mindset that's happening inside of the brain. So it's pre-planned and premeditated. This is a little research study that actually happened with 7th graders. They were asked the question, when is it acceptable to force your date to have sex? And these were actual responses that they said. So, if they maybe knew that they had sex with someone, that was fine to force their date to have sex. They spent even $5 on them, and if she looked like she wanted to have sex. So these things are happening with our children, our society here, really, really young. So we're formulating these ideas and being socialized really, really young. So, and obviously it's about intervention and knowledge. I'm going to talk a little bit about reactions to sexual assault. So there's an array of reactions that can happen when, after the sexual assault had happened, right? Remember that these behaviors, they're about taking back control in the individual's life, right? Control is taken away from them from the sexual assault. So try to regaining that, power within themselves is kind of the goal that they want to do for themselves. And they should be, right? They should be trying to take back in some way a part of themselves that was taken from them. So So these reactions or coping skills are going to be both internally and externally. That's going to be happening with the survivor. And keep in mind too, I mean, they're not going to exhibit all of these things. There could be just a few things. So keep that in mind. These are just a couple reactions to sexual assault that are occurring inside of the mind of the survivor, right? So maybe they're going to say, you know, why did this even happen to me? Why did this happen to me? Why me? Maybe they're going to have unpleasant past memories resurfacing, maybe from a prior sexual assault that happened to them, or even that current one happening in their life. Flashbacks is a really common one, and that can be from anything, right? So a visual we see, we smell something, we taste something. So any of those things, you know, are going to be happening, or possibly going to happen. Difficulty concentrating, and maybe even too, like that re-victimization may be happening. I mean, most likely happening with them. So saying, I deserved it because. So again, when I talked about that earlier, about asking those questions, don't probe and don't re-victimize. And think about what you're saying before you say that, right? Because they're already probably self-blame with that happening. So keep that in mind. So some social things that might be happening, one that a lot of people don't maybe understand is going out with the perpetrator after the sexual assault. So some people look at that like, oh, why would you go out with him after, right? He sexually assaulted you. But, you know, maybe he texts you after and says, hey, I had a really great date. I had a wonderful time. Let's do that again. So in his mind, he doesn't, you know, he's not believing that he's sexually assaulting you. So you're confused. You're thinking, I just thought I was raped, but I'm not, you know, so it didn't happen. So you're second guessing yourself. So there's just different things that he could be doing that may make you feel like you know, you do have to go out with him again. So you could be nervous in crowds. Another thing too is like if someone looks like the perpetrator, that can trigger you as well. Again, that triggering can happen by visual. So if someone looks like your perpetrator, that can create like hypervigilance and anxiety and those kind of things. Disruption with sexual relationships, that's super common. Trouble with intimacy in partners, very, very common, again. Hypersexuality too. A lot of times we'll say, oh, look at that girl, she's so promiscuous. And we never ask why. Why is she promiscuous? What happened to her? You know, so sometimes what happens is it's called sexualized grieving. So it's, you know, again, it's about taking back control. So if that individual can take back control of her body by doing that, that's what she needs to do in that frame of her life. You know, going through this, trying to cope, trying to understand what happened to her. So, and again, I think a good point about here is about reconnecting the body and her emotions. So in some way she needs to do that to cope and get through. These are all, again, really normal reactions emotionally that's happening with her or him. So all of these, you know, depression, anxiety. So if you're seeing this maybe in a friend, I mean, it's okay to ask questions or, you know, again, you don't want to re-victimize and you have to watch your language, but if you're seeing this with a friend, it may be something that at some point in your relationship that you can maybe open up and talk about, and maybe you're that safe person for them. And we all obviously know the physical reactions. So we see those first, right? We see physical reactions. There could be soreness in the body. Maybe there's broken bones with the rape, or bruises, or cuts. Maybe her appetite changes. She loses a whole bunch of weight. What's going on there? Or she's gaining a whole bunch of weight. So eating disorders are common. Sleep disturbances, nightmares. STIs, obviously that's a physical reaction too. And also too, like, a lot of somatic things can happen in the body, right? Like headaches, stomach aches, muscle tension. And you can go to the doctor, you can go to a million doctors and they don't know what's going on with you. They don't understand it. So that is a somatic response to the sexual assault. It's something that doctors can't put their thumb on because it's not a physical, they can't see it from a physical standpoint. So it's kind of the emotional, kind of transferring to the physical of the body. So So obviously sexual assault is not normal, so the reactions are not normal either. I mean, they're normal, we see that, but the reaction, you know, it's not like they're just going to be sexually assaulted and then they're going to go on to their life, right? These are natural, normal things that happen, but we have to keep in mind that the reaction is not normal to a traumatic event. So most times victims are caught between that society expectations of how they're supposed to cope with their experience, and also to our brain needs to be in control. So self-blame, again, I talked about that. So to be in control, maybe you have to blame yourself. Maybe you have to put that on you, so you have control of that. So in the LGBTQ population, some fears that maybe can happen, and this as well can overlap into the heterosexual community as well. Maybe their experience is not taken seriously. They having to explain how the sexual assault happened in more detail than necessary, sometimes that does occur. So that's a fear of coming out and talking about their situation. And mistakenly being perceived as the perpetrator too. So a lot of times in lesbian relationships, you know, they may not take you as serious to say, well, how can another woman rape you? So, you know, those are some things that are common and why people don't come out and speak out about those things, because the community maybe doesn't respond how they would probably maybe respond, most like they would hope, with a heterosexual couple. Reporting too is a big one about gay or bisexual male survivors. So, you know, there's a stereotype that they are promiscuous and that maybe they invited the sexual assault upon themselves. So a lot of times, you know, they're not going to report. They're not believed. So. I wrote there B, physical proof. There is physical proof, but many times there is not. Okay. Again, you need to read between the lines and assume, and don't assume that your friend's going to tell you, right? Or that you can just know when a rape has happened to any person. A lot of us, that's a very secretive place for many people. So you kind of assume that it's never happened. The top part I think is important too. Keep that in mind. No injury does not equal no harm. So just to keep that in mind. So again, we need to look beneath the surface and understand that just because we don't see injury, that there is injury on some level. A lot of us know about the fight and flight responses, correct? A lot of people know about that, right? Well, something new that's kind of come out is the freeze. And I think for a lot of survivors, you know, going through their experience, they said, well, I just kind of froze. I didn't fight, nor did I leave. I don't know, you know, what was that going on with me? So when we look at that, we know that tonic immobility is a survival mechanism. It's something in your brain that's telling you, freeze, don't move. You know, it paralyzes your body. And actually what happens is only, I think it's right here in the back, the hindbrain, it's the oldest part of your brain, right? So that's where the survival is coming in from. So in that moment, when a traumatic thing is happening, your brain is in survival mode. You're not moving, you're not doing anything. And so what happens is your blood flow is just going to the major organs to keep you alive at that point. And many times the vocal cords do not respond, so you can't even scream for help. Nothing is happening in the body, but just trying to keep your actual physical body alive. So keep that in mind. Again, if someone is saying, I didn't leave, I didn't move, I didn't fight, I didn't flight, you know, talk about that a little bit, about the tonic immobility that can happen. It happens a lot too. There's some videos too if you guys want to look it up. Tonic immobility with like animals. It's a real thing, it happens, so. Okay, really quickly just on here, the force continuum. So again, like I spoke about in the beginning, as much force that is needed by a perpetrator, that's what they will use. If they need to use a gun, that's what they're going to do. If they're going to need to just be in the room and look and just stare at you, that's what they're going to use. If that doesn't work, they're going to up the ante. So, you know, we think of crime sometimes, we say, oh, we had a weapon. That must be way more serious than, you know, someone who doesn't have a weapon. That's not true. The perpetrator knows what they have to do to, you know, go through with the sexual assault. Just a couple things. I like to ask people, like, what do you do, like, what do you think about sometimes, maybe if you're alone, maybe after school here at SC4, maybe you have a late class. What are some things that maybe you do when you're leaving class and maybe you know that you're alone? What are some things that you do to prevent being sexually assaulted? What do people do? Walk faster? Good one.
Carry mace.
Good job. Carry mace. Just had training on that. Good job.
Start throwing blows.
Start what?
Throwing blows. Punch people.
Punch people?
Yeah.
Okay. That, I mean, anything's a possibility. What about over here? Right there.
Sometimes women are trying to dress less if they have baggy clothes.
Great. That's a really good one. I don't think I had that on here. Really good. Yes. Anything else that anyone does to prevent sexual assault? Okay. Pretend to talk on your phone. Okay. That's a really good one too. Go ahead. Good job. Yes. That is a lot of times what we do. Yes, for protection as well.
Take a self-defense class.
Good job. Yep. Self-defense. Do you guys have that actually here at SC4, a self-defense class, or no?
Yes.
They do? They do? Like the RAD? Or no? What's it called?
What do they have?
Okay. Someone else had a hand up. What else do you do to prevent yourself from being sexually assaulted? You walk in groups. That's a really good one too. Anything else? I don't want to miss anyone. Okay. Great job. What's up? Yep. Hopefully they're available, right? Yeah. But yes, definitely. So those are all really great responses that you guys have said. Those are all things. Now, we just have to keep in mind, a lot of times we always place that on, you know, the victim or survivor. We always say, well, what can you do to prevent it? And I always say, well, you can just stop raping, and then we'll just prevent the whole thing, right? Another thing, too, is to get an extra cell phone. That's really important sometimes to do. If you qualify for it, I know that they do have like government phones, and if you know, I would just suggest having an extra cell phone. They're really expensive to have cell phones, so sometimes you can utilize that. It's like 250 minutes, I think. So I think it's SafeLink, Assurance, and something else. So see me after if you want to talk about that, though. But these are all resources that you can utilize. So just quickly, so how do we help a survivor? We've kind of been talking about that a little bit to like understand what's going on with the survivor, but again, you want to believe him or her. You're not there to investigate the scene. If you don't want to talk with that person, then maybe you can connect them with someone else to talk with if you feel like you can't fulfill that role. Reinforce that the assault was not her or his fault. Again, they're probably going to have a lot of self-blame with that and believe that it was them. Don't overreact. You're there. They're in crises probably, so you need to fulfill that role of not being in crises and be supportive. A key one I want to talk about is don't gossip. That person's coming to you in confidence. Don't tell other people about their experience because you're taking away their power and control. That's their power to tell you. And actually, you should feel pretty special that they're coming to you. It's something that people don't talk about, doesn't open up about a lot. So just kind of keep that in mind. Also too, consider that the experience is not one part of the person's life. They're not a rape victim, they're their name. They're, Jenny, they're whoever, maybe that happened to them, but that's not who they are. It very much, can be a huge part of their life, but it's not the only thing. The other thing is to make sure too, in this audience here, I'm sure we either have professionals or people who are going into that field. So just remember, don't guilt someone into services. Don't guilt someone into saying you should report this. Maybe another proactive way about that is talking with them about, what are your safety concerns? If you report, what could happen to you? Could he kill you? Do you think this is something that you feel, you would be safe if you had the right resources around you to report? How do you think that would go? So kind of have an open dialogue with that person about that, and don't just react and say, you should report that, you should, do all these things. Eliminate the word should from your vocabulary, because they should decide what they want to do, not what you think. So, and don't minimize the act, validate them. Their safety is most important, so if anything, you want to really talk about being safe for yourself, medically, STIs, those kind of things, physical problems that are happening, or a counselor too. You can make a police report whenever. So the kits are different. To do the rape kits are different for a time frame. It's 96 hours if you haven't showered or anything like that. But the police report, although the facts can get really skewed, you may want to write those down for yourself, or maybe talk with someone and have a liaison between a police officer or something like that. If you want to, you don't want that discussion yet, but you want to get everything you can, like the facts and everything. So you want to think of a previous time when an individual in your life maybe was trustworthy. So that's going to determine if you tell that person or open up to that person. So try to be that person. Try to be trustworthy and someone who doesn't gossip and those kind of things about people in general. So they're going to come to you more likely. Remember that too, it's okay to tell people what you want from them and what you don't want from them. So you're the expert of your own situation, no one else's, and that you need to determine the type of help that's most useful to you. It's not a timeline or sequence. It's not if she does A, B, and C, she's going to be completely, I hate to use the word recovered, but, the process is not done. The process is not done just because she gets therapy or she seeks services. It's fluid. It moves around a lot. So just a couple more slides to wrap up. Just some self-care for yourself. You need to, if someone's talking to you about it, you need to take into account your own emotional needs. You may want to talk to a counselor. There's a lot of free and confidential services at rape crisis centers. We're going to be talking a little bit more about that a little bit later. So these are a little bit of services if you want resources, if you need just information maybe. This right here, I just actually found out this resource. This text your zip code to 55247. You may want to write that down because it's really cool to go ahead and put that in, and I've done it. And it comes up with an array of numbers. It comes up with Blue Water Safe Horizons. It comes up with, I think, in Macomb County, Turning Point. So it kind of gives you a few options of what you want to do. I think it also gives you some hotline numbers, too, just in general. So that's a good resource as well. And so just really quickly, if anyone wants to write down my contact information, you're more than welcome to. I'm here to help in any way possible. But before that, I just want to really quickly go to the RAINN website. So this program is RAINN Day. I don't know if you guys have ever been on the website, but this is kind of a little bit of what it looks like. It's a nationally known organization, and there's a lot of information on here. So these tabs up here are going to be really helpful if you're doing a paper on this, or just if you need this for yourself or a family member or a friend. So the most important that I want to focus on is right here, get help. This online hotline is free and confidential. So you can chat online with somebody about your experience. It's kind of a little bit of a process, but you just have to click a little bit here. Either way, there's a web chat that happens. There's a lot of web chats that are kind of happening with nonprofits and those kind of things to seek services. So that's a really helpful website. I really encourage everyone to kind of go there. And then obviously the number's on top here, the 1-800 number, which I have listed before as well too. And the last resource is 1-in-6, which is the website for male survivors. So this has recently got a lot of media, so I think it's really important for us not to forget that men are sexually assaulted, and I think it's even more taboo to open up and talk about and go through the legal system as a male. So there's resources here, and again, their chat is connected to RAINN's chat. So if you go on either website, you can talk with somebody about that. And so there's just a lot of different resources on here as well. So, okay. So I am all set here. Again, that's my contact information. I'm going to be here to the end if anyone wants to talk with me or if you have any questions or anything like that. So next, I'd like to introduce from the St. Clair County Sheriff's Department, Kelsey, Detective Kelsey Wade.
Welcome. I'm Kelsey Wade. I'm a detective with the Sheriff's Office in St. Clair County. Start out with my presentation. Just my little disclaimer. If there's anything that offends anybody, I'm sorry. This is meant to be real. Some of these slides in here are meant to portray things that happen in real life. I don't think it will offend anybody, but that's just my little spiel. First, we're going to start out talking about a few things. Sexual assault, RAD training, RAD training, and different date rape drugs. So that's kind of what my presentation is going to be about. Sexual assault, I have a definition up here. I guess one important thing to remember is that sexual assault just doesn't happen to women. It happens to men, it happens to kids, it happens to the elderly. So, you know, it can range from anything, including inappropriate touching, vaginal, anal, or oral penetration, intercourse, attempted rape, or molestation. Reporting rapes or some type of sexual assault to the police, people aren't required to report it, but if it happens, you should report it. A lot of rapes or sexual assaults that aren't reported, you just got to think that if that happened, somebody's getting away with it. And you wouldn't want that to happen to somebody else where they continuously, you know, there's some rapists on the loose, touching little kids or something. The sooner the better, obviously. When it happens, yes, it's shocking, it's horrible. But the best thing that you can do is to report it to the police. Because the sooner that we can get working on it and the sooner you report it, the proper steps can be taken. So then we can collect evidence and interview people, catch the bad guy, that sort of thing. Important things for victims. Obviously, you want to get away from your attacker. You don't want to wash or comb, clean any part of your body, save the evidence. Don't change your clothes if possible. If it happened in a scene where you can remember where it's at, a home, vehicle, etc., don't change anything at the scene. Don't clean up. Leave it as it is, because we want to see what happened. And also go to the ER as soon as possible. At the ER, if you choose to go there, ER has nurses called SANE nurses. They're sexual assault nurse examiners. Those are nurses that are especially trained to deal with sexual assaults, and they can collect that sort of evidence. At the hospital, they'll frequently assist you in contacting the crisis staff, and obviously they'll test you for different STDs, pregnancies, injuries. They'll collect evidence. Obviously they'll call us, and we'll come, talk to you, collect the evidence, and then start opening up this case and investigating. Depending on the case, either a deputy or a detective will end up come to the hospital or respond to you and get your statement, collect evidence, take photographs, start their investigation. We're going to talk with witnesses, obviously the suspect and other potential victims. Obviously this is something that's hard to talk about for any person, male, female, kids, adults, elderly. We understand that. It's not always easy to talk about, but obviously we have to know what happened, so it is important. Once the investigation is done, then it's sent over to the prosecutor's office, depending on the outcome of the investigation. I want to talk a little about evidence, because sometimes we have some misconceptions about TV and real life. It doesn't happen like TV does. Evidence doesn't come back and snap of a finger or anything like that. I called the lab today and talked to them about the backlog that they have on evidence currently, and it's around 6 months. For rape kits, they're usually talking about 3, but with different things that they have to test for, like serology or other things, that's another 3 months. So it's around 6 months or later. Obviously, there's been a lot of backlogs from DPD cases and whatnot, but they're catching up and doing a really good job at that. So, when you call and, if you are a victim or a survivor of any kind of assault and you want to know that kind of stuff, it unfortunately does take some time. But when we do send stuff like that to the lab, they're going to test for latent prints, DNA, other bodily fluids, and so on. The next topic I want to talk about here is the Rader training, which is somewhat of a unique thing that our department offers. It's rape aggression defense. We have a couple people, one from corrections and one from the road, that teach this program, and it's actually a pretty good thing. I know you guys mentioned you have something here similar at the college. Basically, it's a self-defense tactics and techniques class, and it's geared towards only women. I know in talking to some of the instructors, they do it for younger kids, maybe some younger male kids too, because it involves some bullying too. So basically, it's a hands-on defense training. It's not a martial arts class, but it's really a lot of fun. Our place offers it usually monthly. It's $25. Once you pay that fee, then you can go back to how many ever classes you want to. It's considered a lifetime membership. It's 1 8-hour training session with lunch, obviously offered for women only. 3 to 12-year-olds, they have, I think, a separate class, and it's based, towards abduction and bullying, which I think is a really good thing. This is one of the pictures from one of the classes, the last one that they had. The red man suit that they use, kind of a fun thing here. We use those in the police academy when we're getting beat up. But basically, they'll have the women end up doing certain moves. It's a combination of a certain number of moves that they'll do to basically fight off an attacker or, defend yourself in a situation such as that. That's the contact information. If you guys have questions about who to contact, you can ask me after. Steve Campo or Patty Muxlow, they can be contacted to sign up for this program. You can call the sheriff's office. That's the main number for the sheriff's office. The next topic we're going to talk about, probably the last one, drugs and date rape. So there's 3 types actually. A lot in sexual assaults of even kids, adults, elderly. One of the things that we see commonly used: alcohol, GHB, or roofies. Alcohol, it's not just a drink, it's a drug, especially if consumed in amounts such as this. So, even low effects of alcohol haven't proven to hurt anybody. As the doctor says, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard, you know, a glass of wine a day keeps the doctor away. I would think that's true. All right, a little on the side geared towards college students. We all know about Jersey Shore, and it's probably as close to real life as some of these shows are. But you can see that excessive amounts of alcohol obviously lower your inhibitions, provide a lot of liquid courage, calms, relaxes you to the point that you end up passed out here, and obviously end up doing things that you normally probably wouldn't do sober. Even low doses of alcohol can lead to certain things. High doses of alcohol obviously are not a good thing either. You know, there comes a point when you get to drinking, let alone if you're taking a medication or if your drink has been spiked with something, that you end up passing out. So, you know, that's just one more thing that contributes to, you know, another component of sexual assaults, that there is sometimes alcohol or other drugs involved. Sexual assaults and alcohol, obviously there's a percentage here about how many involve the perps being have been drinking. So around about 50% of either one of the perp or the victim, in most cases, have had some drinks. And obviously they could be drinking together. Just some tips for you guys when you are out drinking. Obviously you all are college age, and whether or not you're 21 or whatnot, I'm sure have experimented at some point with drinking alcohol. For the people that obviously, you know, are smaller, sometimes it doesn't take much to get drunk. But, you know, just some things you want to be cautious about when you're out at the bar or out at a party. Watch your drink. You know, you leave your drink, you don't know who's attending to it. It's kind of like leaving your purse. Would you leave a, you know, wallet with $500 laying around? No, because somebody might take it. Well, somebody could do something to your drink. Don't go to the bathroom and leave your drink unattended. Hand it to a friend who you trust that's not going to put anything in there, like a roofie or some GHB. Be cautious in mixed drinks. If you're at a party and somebody's making the drinks, you don't want to not know what's in there. Don't accept drinks from strangers. If some guy or girl at the bar wants to buy you a drink, you know, and you don't see the bartender making it, you know, be a little cautious. You got to think of these things. Don't share drinks with other people. If somebody wants you to, oh, try this shot, sip a little of my drink. You know, you got to think about those things because you never know what people are trying to do. GHB, common name for this. Basically, I thought this picture was rather interesting because I've never seen it before. Hopefully you guys can see this. But this girl has a napkin over the top of her drink and the straw sticking through. So even when she's, you know, stumbling around and talking to some guy or girl, somebody's less likely to try and put something into her drink, which I actually thought was kind of a good idea, kind of like a sippy cup, if you will. You see in this other picture that somebody's putting some powder into some wine. This stuff, you got to remember, is colorless and odorless, so you really can't taste or smell if somebody's giving you a roofie or slipping you some GHB. GHB, little about it, it's made in laboratories. This stuff you can't go buy off the shelf at some drugstore. It's usually imported from other countries, kind of like ecstasy is or MDMA. It doesn't just appear in the United States or here in Michigan unless it comes across the bridge or gets imported from somewhere. So it's kind of rare to see it. I can tell you this, probably in any of the cases that I've had or seen when I was at the task force, there wasn't anything to do with date rape drugs or roofies. We get a lot of ecstasy and MDMA, stuff like that, but this stuff is very rare. I would say the more probable drug is going to be alcohol. Obviously, you can buy that off the shelf, most people. It wasn't legal since 1990, but it was used a lot by bodybuilders to improve their muscle mass. Made by this guy. GHB can be a liquid or a powder. It can come in many forms. Paper strips that melt into drinks, little vials, little squeeze vials or anything like that. It's usually mixed with a drink. It's not too common that people just give you the powder or pill, here, take this, you know, that'd be kind of silly. But it can be placed in candy. That's why, you know, like around Halloween time, Mom would always tell you, well, watch out for your candy. Because anything that wasn't in a wrapper you don't want to eat, who knows if somebody did something to it. GHB normally sells for about 25 bucks a dose. Well, you think of, you know, a fifth of liquor, it's a lot cheaper. What are people going to use? Probably that. You don't see too many people going and buying GHB or getting roofies, you know, to use. But it is still out there, so be aware of that. The effects of GHB, this was kind of one of the things that I was thinking might be a good example for you guys. Obviously in this movie, I think there was a point where this guy had roofied all of his friends, and then obviously all the shenanigans start with their crazy trip wherever the heck they were at. But, you know, it causes visual disturbances, like they had in this movie, for those of you who have seen it, and all these other number of things. So, you know, you're kind of in a different world when you're taking this stuff, which to any perp that wants to sexually assault you, you're a great target because you have no idea what's going on, or you're not even awake. Roofies, it's probably the more common date rape drug besides GHB or alcohol. It's legal to a certain extent. I think it's available by prescription only for certain other things. They used it a lot in the past to give people during surgeries to not make them remember things. But it's also hard to detect in people's blood, and odorless and colorless as well. So it also impairs your ability to know what's going on and gives you the effects of amnesia. So basically, kind of recap. You guys know obviously what sexual assault is. There's the definition. And once again, it doesn't just happen to college women. It happens to men, it happens to kids. You know, a lot of what we see is starting with kids being molested when they're young, and it continues, and something happens where it comes out. So I urge you that if you see something, or you know that something is going on, report it. Because it's better to do it now than to wait, obviously, to any extent. This RAD training is also very good. Anybody can go to it, but it's a good training, and you can always go back. And obviously, you need to be aware of date rape drugs. Mainly, I would say alcohol, because that's a lot of what's out there and accessible to most of you. So here's my contact information. That's the Sheriff's Office DD number. If anybody has any questions. Otherwise, I think I'll be sitting through the rest of these, so then once we have our panel up here, you guys can ask more questions. Okay? And next, we will have Prosecutor Mike Wendling come up and give his spiel.
Good evening. As Kelsey indicated, my name is Mike Wendling. I'm the elected county prosecutor for the county of St. Clair. We handle in our office all of the forced sexual assaults, child sexual assaults that occur within the county of St. Clair. So whether it's from Algonac or K-Pac or Yale, Memphis, half of Memphis, Port Huron, all those areas, we handle sexual assaults that occur to both children and to adults. We've seen a lot of sexual assault. A lot of cases that you see on television, or you see people talk about on television, you think, holy cow, that could never happen here in St. Clair County. Let me tell you, it does. It happens on a regular basis. And what people tend to forget, they get in their own routine, they get in their own friendship group, they get in situations where they feel comfortable. And that's usually when it's from that comfort, that desensitization to violence, that most sexual assaults come. Just like children, when we see that traditional child sexual molester, that traditional child sexual assaulter, we always think of the same things. You think of the guy in the van next to the playground who gives a child candy or allows a child to see pornography or tries to befriend the child and then slowly over time desensitizes that child to the things that are occurring to them to the point in which they're being sexually assaulted. At that point, the child no longer thinks that what's happening to them is necessarily wrong, or feels that maybe they have some culpability in what has occurred to them because they looked at some pictures that they know their parents shouldn't have let them look at, or they're in a relationship or they're having a sexual relationship with a person that they trust because they're supposed to trust that person. It's their grandfather, it's their father, it's their aunt, it's their grandmother, it's a person who's in a close relationship, or a priest or a pastor, or a teacher or a professor. Adults aren't that much different from that. And I'm going to talk about sexual assault in a way and say, well, if this has happened to you, or if you're in a situation where the court process treats you in a certain way as a victim of sexual assault. But I'm not just talking about you. I might be talking about your friend, I might be talking about your cousin, I might be talking about a person that you come into contact with who comes to you for advice. I'm going to try and give you a little bit of basic, practical advice to navigate yourself through the criminal justice system. Because much like a child victim, if you find yourself a victim of sexual assault as an adult, and you're all adults, likely you will have encountered much of the same process that a child victim would. Because children are very, very seldom snatched off the street and taken somewhere and sexually assaulted. It's someone they know. It's someone they trust. The same is true for adults. If you find yourself in a date rape situation, or you find yourself in a situation where you're sexually assaulted at a party, or you're sexually assaulted, say, on a bus, or in an area where you feel comfortable, like a college dorm, likely that's going to be a person that you know. And it's often someone that you've already been in a sexual relationship with. And if that person sexually assaulted you, who came to you and stole your car, or that person who sexually assaulted you had come in, taken your money, you wouldn't have any hesitation whatsoever to go to the police department and say, hey, let me tell you what happened to me. Joe, my roommate, or Joe, my boyfriend, or Joe, my uncle, stole my car. I want something done about it. But yet when it's a sexual issue, when it's an issue that happens to your body, happens in this area that society looks at as taboo, it's harder to report. What we need to realize is people report that every day. And there are professionals like Kelsey who take those reports and take them much like they would other cases, although they have to have a certain competency and they have a profession and training and experience that helps them handle those kind of cases. Often it's not traumatic to them, although it's traumatic to you. But that process and what the other speakers have discussed, and things that you know, you've heard this before. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in high schools here in this community talking to high school seniors about what to do or not do and how to protect themselves. But much like children victims, if you're a victim or a friend of yours is a victim, you've gone through that desensitization process through the person who assaults you. You're in a relationship that starts off really good. And we've all been in relationships that the person seemed like the person at the beginning, but as time progressed and you got to know more about that person, they become more violent, they become more controlling, they become more demanding. And yet, that happens slowly over a process and you don't necessarily know how to deal with that. And when it gets so far as they're sexually assaulting you, you don't feel as if things have changed that significantly and you don't report that sexual assault. Also, situations where, just like a child, you find yourself in a bar or in an area or using narcotics or out on a date with a person maybe you necessarily wouldn't normally go with because you have made choices along the way, usually involving alcohol, that were not good choices. And many people figure, well, now I'm in this situation, I've been sexually assaulted, but I made mistakes. I did things wrong along the way, nobody's going to believe me. They're going to think I consented to it because I was intoxicated. Or they think, oh my God, I got myself in this situation because I went out on a date with this person I really shouldn't have. Or I was willing to go to a certain level of sexual contact, but then when I said no, they would not take no for an answer. And people think because I consented to part of this process, then everyone's going to think that I consented to all of it. Not true. And that person has taken advantage of the fact that they slowly over time desensitize you to what has occurred to you. And those assaults need to be reported. Because there are myths about sexual assault. And there are things that many people don't that are consistent as people report sexual assault and are consistent within the criminal justice system that we do see. Almost always alcohol or drugs are involved. Almost every time when we're talking about adult sexual assault, it's from a person that they know, that they put themselves in a situation they were in close proximity with that person, and they were either using drugs or alcohol. And people feel, well, I was drinking, or I was at the bar, or I went home with this person and I was willing to consent. That was really a stupid idea because I barely knew them. But I went home with them and then I was sexually assaulted. They think, well, these are my choices. This is my fault. I made bad choices. That's not true. Because just like if you walked out of the back of the Roach Bar tonight and decide, you know what, I'm not going to drive my car home. I'm going to leave my keys here. I'm going to give them to a friend, and your friend drives your car. They made the choice to steal your car. You may have put them in a position where stealing that car was easier. Maybe you shouldn't have drank out of something that they handed you that was open. Maybe you should have protected yourself a little better. You could have made better choices. Maybe you shouldn't have found yourself alone with them in an apartment where you had no other ride home. Maybe you should have had that second phone. Maybe there are things you should have done, but it doesn't change the fact that they took advantage of you in a vulnerable situation, much like you would take advantage of a child if a sexual predator had the opportunity. And because they've done that, they were able to assault you in a sexual way, and you're a victim. And as a victim, it should be reported. And the people that take those reports listen, and they understand, and they've heard it before. And if you have friends or relatives or neighbors or people that you come into contact with who are in that situation, encourage them to report it. Because the other thing that's true about adult sexual assault that is also true about child sexual assault, they will continue to do it. It's not the first time, and it's likely not to be their last time. And if it is a person that you care about, and it is a person that you want to stop, but you not necessarily want to end that relationship because you love that person or you care about that person, that can be accomplished through reporting. It can't be accomplished through ignoring the fact that it's occurring to you. So the myths and misconceptions about the criminal justice system, what we do, and we handle all those criminal sexual conducts that we aren't there when it happens, obviously. We aren't there before it happens other than prevention, maybe in the schools or talking to you like I am today, and trying to give you some tools to work with so that it doesn't happen to you. And we're not there during that investigation unless Kelsey calls me and needs a search warrant, maybe for bodily fluids or a DNA sample or something of that nature, or maybe just to give some advice along the way of things we've done. But we are there when you enter the court system. And although I may sound cold and regimented, we are caring people, and we do a good job. And we have people that are specially trained in sexual assault and who know how to deal with, not just deal with sexual assault victims, not just deal with the rules of evidence and what protects you as a victim in the criminal justice system, but also protects that person will not get away with it and you will not be subjected to unfair cross-examination when testifying. We have the people who are good at that, and frankly, I'm not that person. I spent 6 months to a year in the sexual assault unit, and by the time I was done, I thought that this was not the profession for me. But there are people in my office who are very good at it, who have a drive for it, and who understand it. And as you go through that process, the things that you might be concerned about, or that person who reports to you, or that person who has a misconception about the system might think, oh my God, I'm going to have to testify, and yes, I'll tell them about the sexual assault, and that was horrible, and this person took advantage of me, but I'm also going to have to tell them about all the people I've ever had sex with, all the things I've ever done. The fact that I'm going to get in trouble because I was drinking or smoking marijuana. I'm going to have all these things that are going to happen to me because I made the decision to report. None of that is true. Michigan has a rape shield statute that protects victims from having to be cross-examined or even acknowledge that they've had sex or sexual contact with another person, other than very, very specific circumstances, ones that deal with consent with this individual. So if you've had sex with that person in the past and they've taken advantage of you on this occasion, you might have to acknowledge that you had sex with them in the past. Usually this is going to be a relationship that you're in with them for a very long period of time, and the difference is not the act, the difference is the way in which the act is perpetrated. And it's not a sexual act, it's a violent act. And it's the same as if your spouse or your significant other, one day you said, I need $10 to go get Burger King, and they gave it to you, and they gave it to you, and they gave it to you, and the next day you said, you know what, you can't have that $10 to go to Burger King because I don't have it to give right now, or I don't feel like giving it, and they beat you up, and they hit you with something. It's really the same thing when you tell them, when you consent to sexual activity, and then later you decide that you no longer want to. That is a violent act. It's a person who takes advantage, and it's a person that needs to answer to that. But once that case is reported, you come into our office, there are laws that protect you as a victim. And those laws are not only designed to protect you, they're also designed to protect the next victim that comes down the road. So, as sexual assault, as a crime group, is actually a crime that, you know, when people say, well, this person's never going to go to jail if I prosecute them, and they're going to get probation, or they're going to get a walk away from the system, that's not necessarily true. Out of all the senses, and I am frustrated on a daily basis with the length of prison terms or jail terms we're able to get on criminal sex, or on regular assault cases, or even on murder cases on occasion, the sentencing guidelines for criminal sexual conduct are pretty good. And they actually do make people accountable for things that they've done. And the parole eligibility decisions that Michigan Department of Corrections make, when you think, oh yeah, they'll go to prison for 10 years, but they'll get out right away, they don't necessarily let people out who are convicted of criminal sexual conduct because they understand the danger. So it's those kind of situations that lend themselves to victims who want to report. And there are services not only within our office and not only in the perspective that the Sheriff's Office takes, the Port Police Department, and Algonac Police Department, and everybody's on the same team when it comes to sexual assault. There's also services that are available to you to help you through that process, because there are a lot of things that happen in the criminal justice system as you go through it that are confusing. A lot of hearings, a lot of subpoenas, a lot of court appearances, a lot of questions. What's going to happen to me? What questions are they going to ask? Does everybody have to listen? Do I have to sit in the courtroom and talk about the sexual act in front of the whole world? Are there things that I can do in order to minimize that? And all those questions can be answered not only by the prosecutor that handles that in whatever county you find yourself, in whatever state you find yourself. Especially in Michigan, there is a victim's rights statute that protects victims. That not only protects you as you go through that process, so that you don't have a prosecutor who makes all the decisions for you, you actually have an impact on that, and it gives you a right not only to have a say in what charges are levied against a person and how those charges are disposed of, or how that person goes to trial, but there's also an opportunity, a statutory opportunity, to speak to the judge and say, Judge, this happened to me. This happened to me, and you need to listen, and I don't get cut off. And if I want to put it in writing, they have to read it in writing, and they have to read it into the record, and the defendant has to hear it. The person that did this to you has to hear it, because that's important, that a person understands that you are taking that power back from them, that they no longer will do that to you or to anyone else. But that victim's rights statute will allow you to have an impact not only on what the sentence will be if you want it to be severe, in those situations where you still care about the person that has done this to you, you can make a victim statement about how you feel about it. You can ask a judge for leniency against a person who's convicted of sexually assaulting you. But if you do nothing, if you choose to ignore it, if you choose to swallow it and forget it, you're likely to never forget it. And you're likely to have problems with it as life goes on. And I'm sure Kelsey would say many of the people who find themselves in the drug trade or prostitution or lives just completely fall apart, and you see them, many of those people are sexually assaulted and it is unresolved issues that they haven't dealt with. The other resource that's available to you, other than the victim's rights statute and the victim's rights personnel that work in our office and are assigned to victims, is Safe Horizons. And as a member of the Safe Horizons board, I can tell you that those people at Safe Horizons are serious about protecting victims. And they're serious about accompanying victims through the system. And when a person reports to them and asks for their assistance, that assistance is there. And they're not just a person that gives you information and says, oh yeah, these are the questions they're going to ask you and good luck, get up there on the stand. They are an advocate for victims. And they represent you when you come through the system. So the criminal justice system, although frightening to even me on a daily basis, there are a lot of things that are there that help victims get through that system and also help people become accountable for choices that they made. As the prosecutor here in St. Clair County, we do a lot of things to try and establish prevention and keep sexual assault from occurring to people within our jurisdiction and within the state. But once it does, we really do, in arm with the Sheriff's Department and other law enforcement agencies in our area, we really do kick it into high gear and do something about it. And you are the focus as a victim. So We do our very best to try and deal with sexual assault. I ask you, that doesn't mean that I want any of you to come visit me at work, because I really have enough to do. So I would rather you focus in right now on the things you can do to prevent yourself from being a victim. And I heard the things like make sure there are street lights, and those are important, and make sure you don't walk after dark, and make sure that you only go outside in groups after dark and you shut your window. But you have to understand that if you find yourself the victim of sexual assault, if you go with the odds, it's likely going to be somebody you know and somebody you trust, and you're going to be using alcohol or some controlled substance, and you're going to be very hesitant to report it, and you've probably been involved in some type of sexual act with that person, maybe not intercourse, maybe not to the extent that they did on this occasion, but they're probably a person that you've been with before. And you have to know that going in, and you have to do the things or design your daily behavior to protect yourself from those things. Don't drink a ton of alcohol and bunch of people you don't know. Don't make bad decisions about the use of narcotics. Be careful about your surroundings and the people that you go places with. And if you're going to go out on a date with somebody you never met before, or you don't know very well, take a friend and their husband or their spouse, or their I don't think husband or spouse because I've been married so long, but their boyfriend, their girlfriend. You know, find yourself doing things that just protect yourself, because there are people out there that look really trustworthy who turn out not to be. So, on behalf of the St. Clair County Prosecutor's Office and the people that work for me and for you, I'm really glad that you gave me the opportunity to say these things. I'm sorry some people left early, but if you keep in mind who those people are and tell them I'm after them, because they really pissed me off. And, no, I'm kidding. But this is a message that can be spread to other people who may find themselves in that situation, because you may have that obligation to your friends. You might have that obligation to younger brothers and sisters. You may have it to other people that you come into contact with. And it doesn't take long to spread the word to try and prevent sexual assault.
Oh my God.
Announcing. I would like to introduce Heather Reno from Safe Horizons. She is one of those advocates I had mentioned, and I didn't forget her. I was just so taken by the whole experience that it just flew my mind. I was pissed.
Hi, I'm Heather. I'm with Blue Water Safe Horizons. And I started with Blue Water Safe Horizons 7 months ago as an elder abuse advocate. I work with geriatrics, individuals who are over the age of 50 that have been sexually assaulted or victims of domestic violence. I'm going to share with you a little bit about Blue Water Safe Horizons, and you have to excuse me. I don't really enjoy light shining on the microphones, but I'll get through this. The agency began in 1977 as a volunteer program dealing with sexual assault and child abuse. It was known as the St. Clair County Rape Task Force, and the task force found themselves dealing with numerous victims. Due to the duplications of efforts, in 1978 it was decided to incorporate with committees focusing on separate issues and become known as the St. Clair County Domestic Assault and Rape Elimination Services, also known as DARES. From 1978 to 1981, DARES was funded through small local donations, and in November of 1981, DARES received its first major funding for Michigan domestic violence prevention and treatment. On December 1st, in 1983, DARES opened its first shelter facility. It offered temporary shelter along with 24-hour crisis support counseling by telephone and also in person. Pathway Shelter Home opened on April 8, 1991, and Carolyn's Place was dedicated on December of 1995. In memory of a former executive director, Carolyn Superzinski. DARES became Safe Horizons in the year 2000, and with a new direction and mission, it became Safe Horizons, and they received their first supportive housing grant in 2002. Safe Horizons has provided more than 70,000 nights of stay to benefit not just the residents of St. Clair County, but also residents who are fleeing from other counties. Safe Horizons became Blue Water Safe Horizons in 2012. Safe Horizons offers shelters. They also offer support services for survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, elder abuse, and homelessness. The services and support programs are delivered to the community in a variety of formats ranging from, like I said, the shelters and housing to support groups and legal advocacy. Carolyn's Place is a secure 20-bed facility. It offers shelter services to women and survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and or homelessness with children. They also offer Pathways, which is a 28-bed facility that provides services to men who are homeless and victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and couples and families as well. Outreach services that are available through Blue Water Safe Horizons is a program that provides assistance to survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence, which may include advocacy at the scene of an incident, during medical treatment, evidence collection, and criminal proceedings. Services including counseling, support groups for survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault, and advocates for survivors of elder abuse and human trafficking. Supportive Housing is a program that is designed to provide outreach, housing search, rental assistance, resource advocacy, and support to homeless individuals and at-risk populations. As of November 1st, 2012, Blue Water Safe Horizons is pleased to announce that they will be offering yet another service to St. Clair County. We'll be starting our first sexual assault advocacy and sexual assault attorney program. And this program was designed to create the wraparound effect for sexual assault survivors. It's not only going to direct the holistic legal interventions, but support such as protection orders, employment rights, education advocacies, housing advocacy, immigration advocacy, family law, and consumer law. With that said, and I just flew right through that, I apologize, I would like to share a story with you in regards to a 66-year-old survivor named Joe that I have and that I've been working with since I started at Safe Horizons. Joy is a 66-year-old divorced woman from St. Clair County, and I had received her referral through another advocate in our crisis line. She was scared, angry, terrified, and not sure where to turn and what to do. And she began our conversation with, "I'm a well-educated woman with not one but 2 master's degrees, and I don't know who can help me." I sat there for a moment. I wasn't real sure how to react, so I listened. Listening is very good. And as the conversation moved on, she proceeded to tell me that she had been out 3 evenings before and enjoyed dinner with 2 of her closest friends. She stated that she last recalls that night going into the woman's bathroom before her ride had arrived to pick her up. She then recalls waking up several hours later in a lot of pain and not knowing what to do. She doesn't phone the police, she phones her sister. She had been instructed by her sister to call the police, but she argued and debated she wasn't going to do that. So her sister phoned the police, and then she was directed to phone our crisis line through the local police department. When Joy came in to see me, and we were talking and I was listening to her, it was kind of a wake-up call for myself because growing up in Yale, I didn't think that these types of things happened, I'll be completely honest, in St. Clair County. I thought it only happened in Detroit. And I didn't think that it would happen to somebody who was 66 years old. And we tend to put an appearance on what we think victims should look like, or a stigma against what we believe our victims should look like. And here was a very prominent businesswoman, very well educated, sit in front of me, who could be my children's grandmother. So after several visits with Joy and our organization walking her through the different supports that we have, and our court advocate being one of them in helping her, walking her through the legal process
And just being there to support her was really all that she was looking for. What she had said to me was her exact words. In the beginning, I felt fear of disbelief, anger, confusion, and humiliation. I thought for sure that everyone in this small community would know about this and know it was me. Working with Safe Horizons has shown me that I'm not alone and that I do have the right to feel more and more confident, and my self-worth and dignity is becoming more apparent. In closing, I would just like to let you guys know that I, again, am Heather with Safe Horizons, and I'm here if you'd like to speak with me afterwards. And we also have Courtney, who is our court advocate with Safe Horizons, here, who is also here and will be able to answer any questions you may have. Thank you for asking me to be here. Sorry I blew through that, but this has been great.
Is there one? I'm assuming
There's different statute of limitations for different degrees of rape, and we'll call it rape with criminal sexual conduct. Depending, there's also a tolling in the statute based on the age of the victim. So you have a certain amount of time after your 21st birthday. So it depends on the act, but the more severe the act, the longer the statute is.
Can a victim file a civil lawsuit against the person that raped her?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's a battery, just like this. If
I noticed that didn't happen much. Is there a reason why? Perhaps because in the civil courts you have to pay for an attorney, maybe?
maybe might be that. Often, maybe the perpetrator doesn't have assets.
Okay.
But I mean, in a lot of criminal cases, for example, O.J. Simpson, there was a criminal case that resulted in an acquittal. Then there was a civil case that resulted in a significant money judgment. That's a physical assault, not a sexual one in that case, but it led to a civil judgment.
Right, but I'm assuming that if a victim files a civil lawsuit, it's not the money. Maybe she's looking for something more than that. And if that's the case,
Most of the things that she would look for probably can be accomplished through the criminal system. The civil system isn't really set up for that type of punishment. I mean, injunctions or personal protection orders, those kind of things. And personal protection orders is civil action. We can assist through those. So in those situations, it's a civil judgment that may keep an offender away from a victim.
Any other questions? Yep.
There was a slide that said there is no mandatory reporting requirement for rape or assault. Is there any third-party reporting requirement of the Heather's story?
Time limit, what are you talking about?
No, reporting requirement for
As
a rape.
far as any required reporting, say if you're a victim or survivor, you know, it's your choice if you want to report it.
But
if you go to a hospital or to...
If somebody witnesses a rape, are we mandated to report it?
Not
witness
necessarily.
or somebody opened up and told
Yeah,
you.
there's certain professions that are required, like obviously, you know, hospitals, medical staff, some people of that nature, they're required to report some things. Schools.
One sort of last thing, because the story that Heather said that the friend called the police, and then the police referred to Safe Horizons. How come the police are not acting on that?
I'm sorry, the police did not call, they did not call us directly. They referred Joy to call us, and so she called us on her own.
Oh, I thought you said it was her friend that called the police for her. I'm sorry, I take my question back.
And she did, her sister had called the police to go and to get her. And the police in turn had given, I went through that, I'm sorry, I'm not a public speaker, obviously. Anyway, they had given her our information and had referred her to our agency. And so she had turned around and called our crisis line, and that's how that went. But she, at that time, when she spoke to the police and when the police arrived there, she said, I don't want to go through this. So she at that time didn't, and they didn't make her go to the hospital. They were very comforting with her and just walked her through, supporting her in just referring her to the services that she could receive.
Does that answer your question?
Well,
What field you're thinking
I mean,
specifically?
the bigger question is, well, how come there isn't the police directly investigating that tip?
A lot of that has to do with the survivor, as we talked about, having to retell their story over and over again, so it's giving them control, and if law enforcement goes ahead with an investigation without the survivor being on board, they're not going to have much to go off.
Yeah, I think what Heather is basically saying is that the police got involved, you know, asked this woman what happened or tried to get some sort of story out of her, but it sounds as though, and I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, that she didn't want to. So that's her choice. We can't choke it out of anybody and make them tell us. You know, if they don't want to talk about it, we can't make you. I can only encourage you to.
There are situations, for instance, in domestic violence related situations where we seek to go forward even if victim isn't what we call on board or victim doesn't seek prosecution. And we do that through other means because the victim doesn't run the process. I mean, the victim doesn't say we want charges and this is what we want, or said we don't want charges. But we're left with a situation where we've requested law enforcement, and they've really responded in our community to get independent evidence of physical assault or domestic violence. And if we can go forward with that, then we will. We would do the same with sexual assault if we could. It's just often the way sexual assault occurs, that independent evidence isn't available. As far as reporting, if it's a child victim, as you probably know, educators, other people have a mandatory reporting. You know, they have to mandatory report. But a friend or a stand nearby or a pastor on the street has no obligation to stop the sexual assault that's occurring. That you could walk by a person being raped in the house, and you can walk by and you have no legal obligation to do anything about it as a citizen. And the same is true of reporting it. So.
Other questions? Yep.
The question I have, and maybe you would know how to approach this, is our school district, and you talk about education and prevention. And in all the years I've had all of my children go through high school, several of them, I've not once seen a forum like this in our junior high or our high school. And every time I've asked, you know, even up to the principals at the high school, wouldn't this be a great forum, or a couple of the other programs they had here? They say you're not allowed to have it because it wouldn't be acceptable because of the content. Well, to me, that's not acceptable, and I'm wondering what you and the police department can do to get your wings in there and offer something like this with Safe Horizons and a few other groups, because every time I've asked as a parent, that's the answer I get.
We do. And like Corrigan High School, we go every year and talk to all the seniors, which isn't enough.
No.
And there are schools that will participate through the Child Abuse and Neglect Council. We go into schools, like my staff and educators from Child Abuse and Neglect Council will go in and talk to 7th graders about, at their level, you know, the things that they should be watching for. We talk to elementary school about internet safety, things of that nature. And we talk to high schoolers. So anytime an administrator will allow us to come or request that we come, we go. But that's a decision made for the school district, not for us.
Right, I'm just saying that.
I don't know if there's a way to force that unless it's just parents.
Forcing it, but I think somebody needs to educate either the school district or someone that's not allowing the education to happen, because you've talked about 7th graders. Obviously, the kids are getting younger and, you know, being exposed more, and I just say, you know, to just say they're not going to allow it, it should be, you know, where it's more proposed to the community.
We also at Safe Horizons do go into the schools that will allow us with programs that we have for youth. But
well,
again,
I mean, I'm just saying, you know, on a survey is Porter Northern offering this, is Port Graduate Middle School offering this? I mean, what schools are allowing it and what schools aren't? Because you have the DARE program at 5th grade, and you have a puppet show on inappropriate touch in 3rd grade. But I mean, that's, you know, it doesn't really continue, in my opinion, to educate the students.
It doesn't. And many of the schools aren't taking advantage of it. And it truly just takes either a teacher or administrator that's willing to arrange it and then willing to give up the curriculum time to promote it. And it would have to come from a groundswell of parents within that district requesting the superintendent or the high school principal provide it. And then the resource is there.
you know, the water's there, doesn't mean they have to drink it.
No, I'm just saying, you have children in the school district, sort of many police, you know, departments,
Right.
and I just think it needs to continue to be, you know, a phone call at least a couple times a year saying, can we come in?
My children get this lecture every Monday morning. All year.
How can you detect from a false report from a real report of rape? Like, say somebody had consensual sex and they felt bad about it and they just wanted to make a rape report or something like that. How can you determine if it's a real report or a false report?
Well, you know, oftentimes it's like investigating any other type of crime. When somebody calls to report, you know, their car got stolen. You know, there's several things throughout an investigation that we look at as police. Statements, physical evidence, other things, common sense, a lot of it. Well, would this normally happen to somebody? And in the case of a sexual assault, obviously, sometimes there's physical evidence, sometimes there isn't. So, you know, based on what we investigate, it's the culmination of everything. It has to do with a lot of things, a lot of what the victim says. And, you know, after we do these for a long time, we can tell most times people who come in that are doing you know, they want to get back at their boyfriend because they're mad at them, or their girlfriend, or whomever. And we can kind of tell those, you know, but those are hard because that's a sensitive issue, and to call somebody out on the carpet about, hey, if you're telling the truth, is quite difficult. So, you know, eventually those cases go to the prosecutor's office, and those become difficult to decide, are we going to charge this person or are we not? But a lot of the times we can culminate it with, you know, witness statements, any physical evidence, things of that nature.
And people accused of sexual assault in Michigan also, once charged, have the opportunity, the defendant has the opportunity for a polygraph. And they can take a polygraph test. And now the polygraphs aren't admissible, and as an office, we don't 100% buy into polygraph because obviously it's a science that isn't that particular, but it's certainly guidance to us that maybe just reconsider a criminal charge. But and then there's the court process. There's a jury. There's beyond reasonable doubt and a lot of other issues there that, in my opinion, protect the rights of the accused. But when I talk to kids in schools about the talk I just had here and said, make sure you don't get yourself assaulted, you know, don't drink, don't do these things. I also talk to high school seniors who most of them were talking to males, but we're also talking to all of them. Make sure you don't put yourself in a situation where you're wrongfully accused.
Because
you
like some of the athletes and stuff like that, like the Kobe Bryant case and all that, and like we don't know if he really assaulted her or she just wants some money or whatever, you know.
Right.
For you actually, when is the appropriate age to have this dialogue with a child? I am a mother of two. Savannah is 9 and Jed is 4. And when do you think is the right age, the appropriate age, to begin this type of dialogue without making it awkward? Yes.
Okay. I think though, you know, it has a timeline. So I think that some clients that I've even talked with, a lot of times they say, you know, maybe they've been sexually assaulted themselves, so a lot of those are triggers for them, you know. The, you know, normal things that children are doing that maybe being like, what's happening here, you know, why are you, you know, touching yourself, or what's going on there? So I think at first the parents need to get first educated about what's normal and natural for a child to do, and kind of know too if that's exhibiting signs of, you know, have they been sexually assaulted. And so I think a lot of times that's just education from a standpoint, understanding from the parents. But I think that the conversation needs to keep flowing on that. I think, I would think, children aren't stupid. I think you can start it as early as maybe 2. You can be mindful and understand different things and talk about, you know, a lot of times there's books too that are helpful. I know that the council, they have a lot of resources and stuff like that for parents that talk about, it kind of breaks it down of like what the timeline is. But a lot of times it's like the, you know, the bathing suit areas. They talk about, you know, whatever your bathing suit's covering, you know, no one should be touching you there, and those kind of things. Go ahead.
I heard about like prevention, but for my daughter, you know, we talked about date rapes and alcohol and things like that. So I'm a little confused about when to start that dialogue with her about prevention.
I think you can just immerse it. Yeah, it's a process.
It's a process. I mean, you don't start, obviously you don't, with the 2-year-old, you don't start at date rape.
Right.
You know,
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. How old is your daughter? 9, okay. Well, I mean, maybe you could start the conversation with saying, oh, you know, do you guys ever talk about sex ed, or do you talk about anything in school, and kind of maybe get the conversation rolling in that way. And again, if that conversation's not even happening at school, again, maybe you can rally and get, you know, some things going here with being in the schools. Because sometimes I think that is an awkward conversation sometimes for adults to have with their children, right? But it's taboo. We've talked about that a little bit here today. You know, we have to break down those barriers. We have to. We have to just immerse ourselves and start talking about it, because we're not talking about it and it's happening. So what are we left with? You know, we're left with people that are traumatized and ashamed and not talking about it. So I think just trying slowly but surely implementing those things. I don't know. I mean, it's a really difficult way to start it. I don't know if you've started that process or not. But I think a really good resource though would be the council.
I mean, even with your 9-year-old, you've started the process. You tell them to keep your hands to yourself. I mean, I'm telling my boys every day, just keep your hands to yourself. And as they grow older and they start to understand the concepts, then it'll start saying, keep your hands to yourself. You never touch people in these specific areas.
Yeah.
So, can I just add to that quickly? Since sexual assault doesn't discriminate based on age, it's great to keep educating yourself or your children, you know, age 2 up to 4, 9, and until they're adults, to have that conversation and just to show them that you are open to talking about it. Because a lot of times it's not, you know, the stranger out of the bushes that's going to assault your teenager. It may be a relative or a family friend. So just bringing that up. Or a teacher, absolutely. Yeah. So that's great that you feel comfortable bringing that up, and you know, your dialogue with your own child. But absolutely, I would encourage that to start.
Yeah, I was just going to say too, just again about the council center. I don't know if you're familiar where that's at, but I'm not sure their hours there, but they are a really good resource. I mean, I've gone in there before and just, you know, gone in there and said, hey, can I have some materials? And they were really open to it. So I don't know if you could, I know on the flyer, you could Google that number and get it and see when they're open. Because that might be a way to get the conversation starting. I don't know, but that could be an option for you too. So good luck with that. It's a difficult thing to start.
Just to piggyback off that, I work with the Child Abuse and Neglect out of the Department of Human Services, and at the age your daughter's at, you just have to keep in mind there's a ton of kids in either their classroom or in her school that are already being sexual assaulted at home, and they think that's normal. So that could come up in a conversation at school, because one child thinks it's normal because that's what's happening to them every night, and then your daughter has no idea what the other kid's talking about. So it was probably about right around 9 when I had that talk with my daughter, because of what we see on a daily basis with the kids that have this structure.
For prosecutor Wendling, how difficult is it usually to prosecute someone accused of like sexual assault? Is it a usually difficult case, or?
Well, as far as conviction rates, they're probably the lowest conviction rates nationwide, because it's difficult to get a jury to convict a person, because they understand what the ramifications are. I mean, your jurors understand that. They also understand that it's a private issue, and it's usually just, I mean, they at least characterize it as a private issue. And there are very few witnesses, because people don't get sexually assaulted unless it's one-on-one usually. So I would say it's one of the most difficult crime groups that we have to prosecute. However, there are a lot of services that are available to victims and to us to assist us in that. DNA, crime lab spends a lot of time on that, although they have a backlog, things like that. And officers and detectives are obtaining the training and are well trained in how to ask the right questions and get to the right answer. You know. It's more difficult, but it's certainly not an unsurmountable task.
Do we have any other questions? And I think our speakers will stick around for a few minutes afterwards, so if you want to speak to them privately, you're welcome to do that. Any questions? No? All right, well, thank you everyone for coming, and thank you.